The prequel to one of Sega's most popular franchises, Yakuza 0 is an action-adventure game set in the neon cities of 1980s Japan. The term Yakuza refers to the massive Japanese organised crime syndicates that have existed for centuries, and this game takes the player on a journey through the extremely interesting subculture that exists within these organisations. The game itself revolves around the intertwining tales of two young members of the notorious Tojo clan, Kazuma Kiryu and Goro Majima. Throughout the story, the players are not only exposed to the motivations, ideologies, and methods of the Japanese underworld, but are also shown what it was like to be a young adult during the hyper-energetic days of the bubble era in Japan. This video will explore the experience that this game provides through the lenses of violence and culture, and hopefully show how efficient this piece of media is at connecting people in Western civilizations to the completely foreign concepts that exist within the Yakuza. Obviously, the action-packed nature of this game and the crime-oriented storyline means that players are going to be taking part in a considerable amount of violence. However, this game is very different to similar titles within the genre, as it continuously attempts to convey the negative consequences associated with violent actions, and sends a message that fighting your way out of a bad situation should only be done if completely necessary. The Yakuza, both in the game and in real life, are known to operate under a strict code of ethics known as n1020, which preaches that every man has a duty to help those who are suffering and oppressed, even if it may mean risking his own life. The game obeys these ethics by consistently showing that those who disobey these rules have to face the consequences. Early on in the game, one of the main antagonists, Daisaku Kuze, is forced to perform the ritual of Yubitsume, in which he has to cut off a portion of his own pinky finger, as a punishment for disobeying the commands of a higher-ranked officer and attacking a civilian. However, the fact that this punishment was one executed in a violent manner means that it has its consequences. The punishment proves to be extremely ineffective in the long run, as Kuze becomes increasingly resentful of the Yakuza ideals and goes on to become more violent than he was originally. This context shows that when violence is used in the wrong way, it only leads to more violence. When looking at the game in greater detail, it becomes obvious that the developers did not make their view on the issue as simple as violence is bad. When examining the main characters of the game, we can see that sometimes violence is a necessary evil. Yakuza 0 prohibits the player from initiating violent encounters and will only allow the player to fight when it is ethical to do so. One example of this can be seen in Goro Majima's story. He is sent to assassinate a blind girl with no explanation, and when he finds out she is innocent, he decides to disobey the order he is given. After it is discovered that he hasn't killed her, Majima uses his violence to protect her from the multiple assassins that were sent to finish the job, as well as find out why she is being hunted down. The fact that he has used violence in a just manner means that when the story ends, the girl gets to live a normal, happy life, and he is allowed to move into a high position within the Yakuza. This depiction of violence shows that sometimes it has to be used, and when used in the right way, it can bring about some positive change. The spectacular and absurd depiction of violence throughout the game is definitely not realistic, but the concepts that the game try to confront surrounding the consequences of violence definitely are. This approach to the game design shows that Yakuza are much more than just a group of criminals, and allows the players to consider the complexity of the issues surrounding violence. Violence is not the only major theme present within Yakuza 0 though, as it also attempts to showcase Japanese culture as a whole. When the player is not off trying to deal with the problems that occur as a result of their affiliation with organised crime, they're able to partake in activities that most normal Japanese people would enjoy, such as singing karaoke and going to arcades. This is where the game really defines itself, as it really assists in setting up the game world for the events throughout the story. One of the main cultural phenomena that the game tries to depict is the bubble culture of Japan in the mid to late 1980s. This era gets its name from the extreme levels of economic prosperity that were experienced during these few years, and the subsequent implosion of the so-called bubble economy. This game doesn't focus on the downfall, however, and mainly concerns itself with the extravagant and energetic nature of the growth period. The game showcases the unique nature of this short-lived subculture through many very direct means. The player can throw thousands of dollars around them in an attempt to distract potential attackers. You can see NPCs holding exorbitant amounts of money up in the air in order to call a cab, and you can have the choice to play through a subplot where you run a property investment firm which ends up being worth so much money that the player will eventually buy a solid gold statue of themselves, just because they can. This constant display of overindulgence allows the player to experience this period of time as if they were actually there, and gives a decent amount of insight as to why these high-spending habits left Japan in economic distress after the growth subsided. Although Yakuza 0 does pay tribute to a lot of the positives that surround Japanese culture, it also demonstrates some of the issues that exist as well. One of the major themes present throughout the story is the role of racism in Japan, as a lot of the characters that players meet throughout their journeys are exiled and shunned because of their Chinese heritage. Tetsu Tachibana is one of the characters that most clearly shows the effect that Japanese racism can have on people, as the constant discrimination against him and his sister during their youths forced him into a career of crime. There are also multiple instances of foreign people in the game being denied access to certain services because of their race, and this can be seen in the underground medical clinics that exist for Chinese people who are refused treatment in the regular hospitals. Discrimination is still an extremely present issue in Japan today, with some studies suggesting that up to 40% of foreigners living in Japan are refused access to basic needs such as housing and education because of their background. This realistic reflection of cultural values means that players are given a balanced and unbiased view of what living in Japan is really like, and this makes the game so much more realistic and immersive. In conclusion, it is clear to see that Yakuza 0 has the amazing ability to let the player experience the extremely unique nature of the Japanese underworld during one of the most exciting cultural periods of time to ever exist. Through the use of thought-out and meaningful combat, as well as an intelligently designed game world, players that are used to the values of Western societies are transported into an unfamiliar and strange place, where they are allowed to develop their own feelings and opinions on certain topics that they may not have had the opportunity to in real life.